Captain Frank Bradley stood at attention on the bridge of the Vaxtari warship Subjugator, his face carefully blank as Commander Zexistral paced before him. The alien was tall, nearly 7 feet, with iridescent blue skin that seemed to pulse, with barely contained energy. Frank had learned long ago that showing any emotion before a Vaxtari was dangerous, especially one as high-ranking as Zexitral. "Your soldiers performed adequately in the Centauri operation," Zexitral said, his voice a strange mix of clicks and whispers that the translator rendered into flat English. "For primitives." "Thank you, Commander," Frank replied, the words bitter in his mouth. 53 human Marines had died in that operation, a brutal suppression of miners who'd failed to meet their quotas. But Frank knew the rules. Humanity had learned them at the cost of 2 colony worlds and 16 million lives. The Vaxtari didn't tolerate defiance. They ruled through terror, and for 50 years, Earth had bowed its head rather than face extinction. "Approach the New Hope colony," Zexitral continued. "You will prepare your people for inspection. The Imperium has new requirements." Frank's stomach tightened. New requirements never meant anything good. "Yes, Commander, may I ask what changes to expect?" Zextral's mouth slits widened in what passed for a smile among his kind. "The resource quotas will increase by 40% effective immediately." Frank nearly broke his composure. 40%? "Commander, with respect, New Hope is already operating at maximum capacity. The equipment is irrelevant," Zextral cut him off. "The needs of the Imperium are what matter. If your species cannot meet these simple demands, perhaps we overestimated your usefulness." The threat hung in the air between them. Frank lowered his eyes, hatred burning in his chest. "We will meet the quotas, Commander." "See that you do. You're dismissed." Frank left the bridge, his hands shaking once he was alone in the corridor. He entered his quarters and activated the privacy field, one small concession the Vaxtari granted to their valuable servants. Then he slammed his fist into the wall. How could he tell the colonists? New Hope was already working around the clock. The colony had been established 8 years ago as a titanium mining operation, and the 4,000 humans there had built something close to a real community, despite Vaxtari oversight. They had schools, hydroponic gardens, even a small park in the central dome. With these new quotas, they would have to dismantle half their living spaces to make room for more refining equipment. The park would be the first to go. Frank activated his comm unit. "Get me a secure line to Linda Weaver." Linda Weaver watched her daughter Amy chase a butterfly in the colony's small park. At 6 years old, Amy had never seen Earth, never felt real wind or seen an ocean, but she didn't know what she was missing, and Linda worked hard to keep it that way. "Higher, Mommy, higher," Amy called, her blonde curls bouncing as she jumped for the butterfly. Linda laughed and lifted her daughter. "Up. Got it." Amy giggled as the butterfly escaped through her fingers. "It's too fast." "They're tricky," Linda agreed, setting her down. 10 more minutes, then we need to go. I have a meeting." As New Hope's colonization specialist, Linda was responsible for maintaining life support, food production, and living arrangements. It was a demanding job, but it allowed her to create as normal a life as possible for Amy. Her comm unit buzzed. The ID showed Captain Bradley, her official contact with the Vaxtari overseers. Linda frowned. "He wasn't scheduled to visit for another month." "Weaver here," she answered quietly. "Linda, we're inbound to New Hope. ETA 3 hours. Frank's voice was tight. "Already? What's happening?" "Can't say much over comms. Zextral is coming personally. It's about the quotas." Linda's heart sank. How bad? The pause told her everything. "Prepare the usual welcome. We'll talk when I'm planet-side." The line went dead. Linda looked at Amy, still chasing butterflies, blissfully unaware of the Vaxtari and their cruel demands. "Amy, honey, we need to go now." "But Mommy, you said 10 minutes. "I know, sweetheart, but something important came up. How about we stop for ice cream on the way home?" Amy's face lit up. "Chocolate?" "Of course." As they walked hand in hand through the dome, Linda nodded to other colonists. News of the Vaxtari visit was already spreading. She could see it in their tense faces and hushed conversations. At home, Linda helped Amy change into clean clothes and set her up with a learning tablet. Mommy has to work now. Be good, okay? Will you be back for bedtime? I'll try, honey. Linda kissed her daughter's forehead. If not, Mrs. Garcia next door will tuck you in. In her small office, Linda activated the colony emergency protocols. Within minutes, the department heads joined a virtual meeting. The subjugator will arrive in less than 3 hours, Linda explained. Captain Bradley indicates they're here about quotas. Jack Powell, the mining supervisor, groaned. We're already running the drills at 110% capacity. The equipment can't take much more. We don't have a choice, said Elena Ruiz, head of security. Remember what happened to the Proxima colony when they failed to meet demands. Everyone fell. Silent. 3 years ago, the Proxima colony had fallen behind on deuterium production. The Vaxtari had executed the entire administrative staff as an incentive for the survivors. We'll prepare the formal reception, Linda decided. Full protocol. Elena, make sure none of the more outspoken colonists are present. Already on it. Jack, have the latest production reports ready but emphasize the maintenance issues. Maybe we can negotiate a smaller increase if they understand our equipment limitations. Worth a try, Jack said without conviction. As the meeting ended, Linda stared at the colony map on her wall. 8 years of careful planning and hard work had transformed this hostile planet into a home. The park had been her special project, a small piece of Earth for children who might never see the real thing. How much of it would survive the Vaxtari's new demands? The subjugator entered orbit with the quiet menace of a predator. Smaller than many Vaxtari warships, it was still large enough to cast a shadow over New Hope's main dome when it descended through the atmosphere. Frank stood behind Zextral as the ship landed. The commander seemed pleased by the colony's reception. An honor guard of humans standing at attention, department heads lined up with appropriate deference, and the Vaxtari flag prominently displayed. Linda Weaver stepped forward. Commander, Zextral, New Hope Colony welcomes you. We are honored by your presence. Frank could see the strain behind her professional smile. 8 years ago, Linda had been an administrator on Earth, volunteering for colonial service after losing her husband. In a Vaxtari pacification operation, she'd raised Amy alone while helping build this colony from nothing. Now she was bowing to the same aliens who had made her a widow. Zextral didn't acknowledge her greeting. He simply stepped off the ramp and surveyed the assembled humans as one might inspect livestock. Captain Bradley speaks highly of this colony's efficiency, he finally said. We shall see if his assessment is accurate. I will inspect your operations, then we will discuss the new quotas. Frank watched Linda's face pale slightly at the word quotas, but her expression remained calm. We look forward to demonstrating our productivity, Commander. If you'll follow me, we've prepared a tour of our facilities. As the reception party moved toward the main dome, Frank fell into step beside Linda. 40%, he whispered. Linda stumbled slightly before regaining her composure. Impossible, she breathed. I know. Ahead of them, Zextral moved with the confident stride of someone who owned everything and everyone around him. In a way, Frank thought he did. The Vaxtari Imperium had ruled the local star cluster for thousands of years. Earth, barely a century into space exploration, had been easy prey. Humanity's choice had been simple: serve or die. But looking at the colony, at the people who had built lives here despite everything, Frank wondered how long they could continue to live under such terror. As they entered the main dome, a child's laugh rang out somewhere in the distance. Frank saw Zextral's head turn slightly toward the sound, his expression unreadable. The inspection had begun. The inspection dragged on for hours. Commander Zextral examined every part of the colony, from the mining drills to the food storage units. He showed particular interest in the refining facilities, where raw titanium ore became the pure metal the Vaxtari prized. Linda answered his questions precisely, hiding her fear behind professionalism. Beside her, Frank watched Zexatral for any sign of weakness they could exploit. He found none. "Your equipment is inefficient," Zexatral finally declared as they exited the last facility. "This explains your poor output." "With respect, Commander," Linda replied carefully. "This equipment is all we were allowed to bring from Earth. If the Imperium would permit upgraded machinery—" "You waste my time with excuses," Zexatral interrupted. "The new quotas stand. 40% increase effective immediately." Jack Powell stepped forward. "Sir, the drills are already running beyond safe levels. Without maintenance, your safety concerns are not the Imperium's problem." Zexatral's voice became dangerously soft. "If humans die, we will simply send more. You are easily replaced." Frank saw Linda's hands tighten into fists. He touched her arm gently, a warning. "We understand, Commander," Frank said. "New Hope will meet the quotas." "See that they do, Captain. Tonight, we will finalize the details at your formal reception. I expect all department heads to attend." Zexatral turned and walked toward the Vaxtari shuttle that would take him back to the orbiting ship until evening. When he was gone, Linda's shoulders slumped. "We can't do it, Frank. We'll have to run the drills around the clock, cut life support to minimum levels. The park will have to go," Jack added quietly. "We need the space for more refiners." Linda closed her eyes briefly. "I know. We'll find a way," Frank assured them, though he didn't believe it himself. "For now, focus on impressing them tonight. Best behavior from everyone." They nodded and separated to prepare for the evening reception. Amy Weaver was bored. Mrs. Garcia had been watching her since lunchtime, but the old woman had fallen asleep in her chair. Amy's learning tablet had run out of power, and there was nothing to do. She went to the window and looked out at the colony. Something was happening today. Lots of grown-ups walking around looking worried. Her mom had been gone all day. Then Amy saw something strange, a flash of purple light from the trees beyond the colony fence. No one had ever taken her to those trees. Mom said it wasn't safe outside the colony, but the light was so pretty. It flickered again like a dancing star. Amy looked at Mrs. Garcia, still snoring softly. She could just take a quick look. She'd be back before anyone noticed. Amy slipped out of the apartment and made her way through the corridors. Everyone was busy preparing for something, and no one paid attention to one small girl. She knew the way to the maintenance door. She'd seen workers use it before. The door wasn't locked. Amy pushed it open and stepped outside the colony dome. For the first time in her life, the air felt different, thinner and colder. The sky was a strange orange color, and there, just past the first line of trees, the purple light flickered again. "Hello?" Amy called, walking toward it. "Is someone there?" The light seemed to retreat as she approached. Amy followed, curiosity pulling her deeper into the alien forest. At the formal reception that evening, Linda stood with the other department heads, wearing the colony's best uniform. The dining hall had been transformed with the few decorations they had, and their best food was laid out on tables. It wasn't much compared to Vaxtari luxury, but it was all they could offer. "Where's Amy?" Frank asked as he joined her. "With Mrs. Garcia. I'll be late getting home tonight." Linda sighed. "How do I explain to a 6-year-old that her favorite park is being turned into a refinery?" Before Frank could answer, the doors opened and Commander Zexatral entered with his officers. The humans fell silent and bowed their heads as protocol demanded. The reception began with formal speeches. Linda barely heard the words, her mind on the impossible task ahead. They would need to work the colonists in longer shifts. Safety standards would have to be ignored. People would get hurt, or worse. Halfway through dinner, Linda's comm unit buzzed. She glanced at it discreetly and saw Mrs. Garcia's ID. Strange. The old woman knew not to call during the reception unless it was an emergency. Linda excused herself and stepped into the hallway. "Mrs. Garcia." "Linda, I'm so sorry." The old woman's voice was panicked. "I fell asleep and when I woke up, Amy was gone." Linda's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean, gone?" "She's not in the apartment. I've checked everywhere. I called some neighbors, but no one has seen her." Linda fought to keep her voice steady. "When did you last see her?" Around 2 hours ago. Linda, I'm so sorry. Call security right now. Tell them to start searching the residential section. I'll be there as soon as I can. Linda ended the call and leaned against the wall, her heart racing. Amy had never wandered off before. Had she gone looking for Linda? Was she lost in the colony? Frank stepped into the hallway. Linda, what's wrong? Amy's missing. Mrs. Garcia can't find her. Linda struggled to maintain her composure. I need to go. Frank nodded. Go. I'll make your excuses to Exiled. Linda hurried through the corridors, fighting panic. The colony wasn't that big. Amy couldn't have gone far. When she reached her apartment, she found Mrs. Garcia in tears and Elena Ruiz, the security chief, already organizing search teams. We've started checking all public areas, Elena explained. When did you last see her? This morning, before the inspection. Linda's voice shook. She's only 6, Elena. She doesn't know her way around the whole colony. We'll find her, Elena promised. I've got 20 people searching already. Linda grabbed a handheld scanner. I'm joining the search. For the next hour, they combed through the colony. Every room, every corridor, every storage area. They called. Amy's name checked with every colonist they met. No one had seen her. By midnight, the entire colony knew Amy Weaver was missing. Even the evening reception had been disrupted as more colonists joined the search. Linda stood in the colony's central hub, where Elena had established a command center. Search teams reported in regularly, each with the same message. No sign of Amy. Could she have accessed the maintenance areas? Frank asked, having joined the search after making excuses to the Vaxtari. Elena nodded grimly. We're checking there now. But if she went into the ventilation system or the utility tunnels, she didn't finish the sentence. They all knew those areas could be dangerous with exposed wiring and steep drops. What about outside the dome? Linda asked suddenly. Elena and Frank exchanged glances. The external doors are all locked, Elena said. She couldn't get out. Check anyway, Linda insisted. A security officer approached them, his face grave. Chief, we found something. The maintenance door in Section 4 was unlocked, and there are small footprints in the soil just outside. Linda felt the room spin around her. She's outside? In the dark? Frank steadied her. We'll expand the search. I'll get my Marines to help. We should inform Commander Exiled, Elena said reluctantly. Protocol requires. I don't care about protocol, Linda snapped. My daughter is out there alone. The Vaxtari have better scanning technology, Frank reminded her gently. They could find her quickly. Linda knew he was right, but the thought of asking the Vaxtari for help made her sick. Still, for Amy, she would beg if necessary. Let's go, she said. They found Exiled in the colony's administration building, looking irritated at the disruption to his evening. Commander, Frank began formally, we have a situation. A child has gone missing. This is why you interrupted the reception? Exiled's voice was cold. For a missing juvenile. My daughter is outside the colony dome, Linda said, stepping forward. She's only 6 years old. The night temperatures drop below freezing. She won't survive long. And this concerns the Imperium how? Exiled asked. Linda stared at him in disbelief. She's just a child. Please, your ships have better scanners. You could find her in minutes. Exiled looked at her with something close to amusement. Primitive species must solve primitive problems. Your breeding practices are not our concern. Frank stepped between them as Linda lunged forward. Commander, I formally request assistance under Section 7 of the Colonial Agreement. The loss of any colonial citizen threatens production quotas. Exiled's mouth slits twitched. Your request is denied, Captain. One human larva is insignificant. Your species breeds rapidly enough to replace it. He turned to leave. I expect the new quota arrangements on my desk by morning. Do not disturb me again with such trivialities. As the door closed behind him, Linda sank to her knees, tears finally breaking through her control. He won't help, she whispered. He won't help find my baby. Frank helped her up, his face hard with anger. Then we'll find her ourselves. Every colonist, every Marine. We'll search all night if we have to. Outside, the alien forest stood dark and silent, hiding its secrets. And somewhere within it, a small girl followed a purple light deeper into the darkness. The search continued through the night. Every able-bodied colonist joined teams that combed the areas outside the dome. They carried lights and portable scanners, calling Amy's name into the darkness. Linda refused to rest. She pushed forward, into the alien forest, Frank at her side. The trees had smooth blue bark and leaves that glowed faintly in the dark. Under different circumstances, Linda might have found them beautiful. Now they were just obstacles hiding her daughter. "Amy?" she called for the 100th time. "Amy, can you hear me?" Only the strange whisper of the alien wind answered her. "We should head back to the command post," Frank said gently. "The other teams might have found something." Linda shook her head. "She's out here somewhere, Frank. I can feel it." Frank didn't argue. He had known Linda for years, since before the colony when they both worked at Earth's Defense Ministry. She had always been strong, even after losing her husband. But now, he saw a new kind of determination in her eyes. A mother's fear turned into something powerful and dangerous. At dawn, they returned to the colony for new supplies. Elena Ruiz met them with coffee. "Anything?" Linda asked immediately. Elena shook her head. "Not yet, but we found more footprints leading toward the restricted zone." Frank and Linda exchanged glances. The restricted zone was an area 5 miles from the colony that the Vaxtari had declared off-limits when New Hope was established. The colonists were told it contained unstable geological formations. No human had ever been allowed inside. Why would she go that way? Linda wondered. "Maybe she saw something," Frank said. "Amy's curious by nature." "The Vaxtari have sensors around the restricted zone," Elena warned. "If we cross that boundary, they'll know." Linda's face hardened. "I don't care anymore. If Amy went in there, so will I. I'm coming with you," Frank decided. "Elena, keep coordinating the search teams. If the Vaxtari ask, tell them we're checking the eastern sector." Elena nodded. "Be careful. And Linda, we'll find her." Linda grabbed fresh supplies and a better scanner. As she turned to leave, she noticed Exiled watching from across the command center. His alien eyes revealed nothing, but Linda felt a chill run down her spine. She quickly looked away and followed Frank outside. Amy wasn't sure how long she had been walking. Her legs hurt and she was very cold. The pretty purple light kept moving just ahead of her, leading her deeper into the forest. "Please wait," she called to it. "I'm tired." The light paused, hovering between 2 trees. It seemed to pulse like it was breathing. Amy approached slowly. The light was beautiful up close, swirling patterns of purple and blue. It reminded her of pictures she had seen of Earth's northern lights. "What are you?" she whispered. The light moved again, drifting toward a clearing ahead. Amy followed, forgetting her tiredness. The trees opened up, and Amy gasped. In the clearing stood a large metal building, sleek and silvery. It didn't look like the colony buildings. It was smoother, more elegant. Soft lights glowed from windows along its sides. The purple light drifted toward a door in the building's side. Then it vanished. Amy hesitated. She knew she should go back to the colony. Mom would be worried, but she had never seen a building like this before. Maybe someone inside could help her get home. She walked up to the door. It slid open silently. Amy stepped inside. Frank and Linda reached the edge of the restricted zone by mid-morning. A simple marker, a red post stuck in the ground, indicated the boundary. Beyond it, the forest grew denser, the trees taller. "Last chance to turn back," Frank said, checking his weapon. He had brought a standard-issue pistol. Not much use against Vaxtari technology, but better than nothing. "Not without my daughter," Linda replied, stepping past the marker. They moved carefully, scanning for any security systems. The forest seemed peaceful, but both new appearances could be deceiving. The Vaxtari were masters of hidden technology. After 30 minutes of walking, Frank stopped suddenly, holding up his hand. Linda froze. "Look," he whispered, pointing to a patch of disturbed soil. "Those are Amy's footprints." Hope surged through Linda. She was here. Which way did she go? Frank examined the ground. "This way. The tracks are fresh, maybe 8 hours old." They followed the small footprints, moving faster now. The trees began to thin out, and ahead they could see a clearing. "Get down," Frank hissed, pulling Linda behind a large trunk. In the clearing stood a building, clearly Vaxtari design. It was smaller than their warships but had the same sleek lines and metallic sheen. No windows were visible from their position, just a single door on the near side. "What is that doing here?" Linda whispered. "They told us this area was dangerous because of unstable ground." "They lied," Frank said grimly. "The question is why, and what does it have to do with Amy?" Linda checked her scanner. "I'm picking up energy readings but no life signs. The walls must be shielded." "Amy's tracks lead straight to it," Frank noted, his voice tight. She went inside. Linda started to rise, but Frank held her back. "We can't just walk in. That's a Vaxtari facility of some kind. It'll be defended." "My daughter's in there," Linda said, her voice breaking. "I'm not waiting." Frank knew there was no stopping her. "At least let me go first." They moved to the edge of the clearing, staying low. No alarm sounded, no guards appeared. The building remained quiet and seemingly unprotected. "It's too easy," Frank muttered. "Or they never expected anyone to find it," Linda suggested. They reached the door. It was smooth metal with no visible handle or control panel. Frank examined it carefully, then pressed his palm against the surface. To their surprise, the door slid open. "They're not worried about human intruders," Frank realized. "This place isn't defended against us because they don't think we're a threat." Linda didn't care about Vaxtari security assumptions. "Amy," she called softly as they entered. "Amy, are you here?" The interior was brightly lit and sterile. White walls, white floors, and a corridor leading deeper into the building. The air smelled clean but with an odd metallic undertone. They moved forward cautiously. The corridor opened into a large room filled with computer terminals and strange equipment. Screens displayed data in Vaxtari script, incomprehensible to human eyes. "What is this place?" Linda wondered. Frank examined one of the devices. "It looks like a research facility, but what are they researching out here?" A soft noise came from a doorway on the far side of the room. Linda turned instantly. "Amy? Is that you?" No answer, but the noise came again. A muffled thump. Linda rushed to the door, Frank close behind her. It opened automatically, revealing a smaller room. The walls were lined with clear containers, each about the size of a refrigerator. Most were empty, but 3 contained something. Linda moved closer, then recoiled in horror. Inside each occupied container was a child. One was a small reptilian creature with golden scales, clearly not human. Another appeared to be from a species Linda had never seen, with 6 limbs and silvery fur. And in the 3rd container was Amy. "Amy!" Linda cried, rushing to the container. Her daughter floated in a clear liquid, eyes closed, a breathing mask over her face, wires connected to small patches on her head and chest. "Is she alive?" Linda asked, her voice breaking. Frank checked the monitors attached to the container. "I think so. These readings look like vital signs. Her heart is beating." "Get her out," Linda begged. "Please get her out of there." Frank examined the container for a release mechanism. "I'm not sure how. This is alien technology. If we do it wrong, step away from the specimen," a cold voice ordered from behind them. They turned to find Zextral standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 Vaxtari guards. All 3 held weapons pointed at Frank and Linda. "Specimen?" Linda's voice shook with rage. "That's my daughter." "That is Vaxtari property," Zextral corrected her. An interesting research subject. Human young display unique neurological patterns not seen in other species. Frank moved slightly, positioning himself between Linda and the Vaxtari. You've been experimenting on children? On Amy. We study all primitive species, Zextral said, as if explaining something obvious. Your offspring are particularly valuable for understanding how humans form emotional bonds. Such knowledge helps us control your kind more effectively. Linda stared at her daughter floating in the alien tank, then at the creature who had taken her. Something broke inside her. The last thread of fear that had kept her obedient to the Vaxtari for so long. I want my daughter back, she said, her voice suddenly calm. Now. Zexitral made the strange mouth movement that passed for a smile among his kind. You are in no position to make demands, human. Your presence here violates multiple regulations. The penalty is death. Then you'll have to kill me, Linda replied. Because I'm not leaving without Amy. The Vaxtari commander raised his weapon. That can be arranged. Time seemed to freeze in the laboratory. Linda stared down the barrel of Zexitral's weapon without flinching. Behind her, Amy floated in the clear liquid, unaware of the danger. Commander, Frank said carefully, think about what you're doing. If you kill us here, others will come looking. No one will find this facility, Zexitral replied confidently. And even if they did, what could your primitive species do about it? The Imperium has ruled your kind for 50 years. We will rule for 1,000 more. Linda's eyes never left her daughter. Why Amy? Why my child? Something like curiosity flickered in Zexitral's alien eyes. This specimen was not targeted specifically. Our collection drones detected a young human outside the colony perimeter and followed standard protocol. Collection drones? Frank asked, his mind racing for a way out of this situation. The lights, Linda realized suddenly. The purple lights, Amy must have followed. They were your drones. Zextral made a dismissive gesture. The drones emit a frequency that attracts the young of most species. It simplifies collection. Frank's hand inched toward his weapon. If he could just distract the guards long enough for Linda to get Amy out. You won't succeed, Zexitral said, noticing the movement. Your projectile weapon cannot penetrate our shields. Maybe not, Frank agreed. But I have to try. Before anyone could move, an alarm blared through the facility. Red lights flashed. Along the walls. Zextral turned to his guards. Check the perimeter. As one guard moved toward a console, Frank saw his chance. He lunged forward, tackling the second guard to the ground. The Vaxtari was stronger, but Frank had surprise on his side. Linda, get Amy, he shouted as he wrestled with the alien. Linda didn't hesitate. She grabbed a piece of equipment and smashed it against Amy's container. The clear material cracked but didn't break. Zexitral aimed his weapon at her, but before he could fire, the facility shook with a powerful explosion. The force knocked the commander off balance. What is happening? Zexitral demanded, steadying himself. The first guard checked the monitors. Humans are attacking the facility, many humans. Impossible, Zextral snarled. Frank managed to knock his opponent unconscious and scrambled to his feet. Not impossible, inevitable. Outside, the sound of weapons fire grew louder. Linda kept striking Amy's container until finally, the material shattered. The liquid spilled out onto the floor and Amy slumped forward. Linda caught her daughter ripping off the breathing mask and monitoring devices. Amy! Amy, can you hear me? The girl's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. She was breathing, but unconscious. Zextral backed toward the door, his weapon still trained on them. This changes nothing. Your colony will be punished for this attack. The Imperium does not tolerate rebellion. Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. Ceiling panels crashed down and the lights flickered. You're wrong, Frank said, helping Linda wrap Amy in his jacket. This changes everything. The door behind Zexitral burst open. Elena Ruiz stood there with a group of armed colonists. They had mining explosives strapped to their belts and determination in their eyes. Frank, Linda, Elena called. We tracked your signals. The whole colony is here. Zextral spun to face the new threat, but it was too late. Elena fired her weapon, and the commander collapsed to the floor. "Is he dead?" Linda asked, cradling Amy in her arms. Elena checked the fallen alien. "Stunned. We modified some mining tools into weapons. Not very powerful, but enough to overcome their personal shields at close range." Frank grabbed Zextral's weapon. "We need to free the other children." "Already happening," Elena said. "We found 3 more rooms with containers. The medical team is working on them now." Linda kissed Amy's forehead. "We need to get her to the medical center. She's not waking up." "Let's move," Frank ordered. "This facility might have a self-destruct system." They hurried through the corridors, now filled with colonists. Some were fighting the remaining Vaxtari guards, others were gathering data from the computers, and medical teams were tending to the rescued children. Outside, Linda blinked in the bright sunlight. The clearing was filled with colonists, hundreds of them. They had brought vehicles, weapons, and supplies. This wasn't just a rescue mission, it was an uprising. "How?" Linda asked as they rushed toward a medical transport. "When you didn't return by morning, we sent search teams to the restricted zone," Elena explained. "One team found the edge of the facility and reported back. Then we found something else, a hidden communication array. The Vaxtari have been monitoring everything we do, everything we say." Frank's face darkened. "The increased quotas. They knew exactly how much we could produce because they were watching us struggle. The colony voted," Elena continued. "Unanimously. We decided it was time to fight back." They reached the transport, where Dr. Sam Rivera waited. He immediately began checking Amy's vital signs. "Her neural activity is unusual," he reported after a quick scan. "They must have been stimulating specific areas of her brain. I need to get her to the medical center." Linda climbed into the transport, still holding Amy tightly. "What about the Vaxtari ship? The subjugator is still in orbit." Frank looked up at the sky. "They'll retaliate when they realize what's happened." "We thought of that," Elena said grimly. "Before we attacked, we sent a message to Earth, with proof of what the Vaxtari have been doing here." Frank stared at her. "You did what? How?" "All communications are monitored." "Not all of them," Elena smiled slightly. "Jack Powell has been working on something for years. A way to send compressed data bursts that look like stellar background radiation. The Vaxtari never detected it." "What did the message say?" Linda asked. "Everything. About Amy. About the children. About what they've been doing to us for 50 years. Elena's eyes were hard. "And we included a detailed scan of the subjugator. Its weapons, its shield frequencies, its vulnerabilities." Frank shook his head in amazement. "Earth won't stand a chance against the entire Imperium." "Maybe not," Elena agreed. "But they'll fight for their children, we all will." The transport lifted off, heading back to the colony. Below them, colonists continued to stream into the facility, taking everything of value: data, technology, weapons. In Linda's arms, Amy stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then settling on her mother's face. "Mom?" she whispered. Linda hugged her daughter tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." There was a purple light, Amy said weakly. It was pretty. "I know, sweetie. Just rest now." Amy's small hand touched Linda's wet cheek. "Why are you crying? Are you sad?" Linda shook her head, smiling through her tears. "No, honey, I'm not sad. I'm just so happy to have you back." Over the transport's radio, a voice suddenly broke through. "All units return to colony immediately. Vaxtari ships are descending from orbit, multiple vessels heavily armed." Frank looked out the window. In the distance, he could see them. 5 Vaxtari ships, including the subjugator, breaking through the clouds. "They're coming for us," he said quietly. Linda held Amy closer. "What do we do now?" Frank checked the weapon he had taken from Zextral. "We fight. For Amy. For all our children. We fight." The transport sped toward the colony dome, now visible on the horizon. Behind them, the Vaxtari facility erupted in flames as the last colonists set off explosives before retreating. In orbit above New Hope, another event was unfolding. The Vaxtari ships had detected an unexpected energy signature, a ship dropping, out of faster-than-light travel. Then another, and another. Earth had received New Hope's message, and Earth had responded. The medical transport carrying Linda and Amy landed inside the colony dome, just as the warning sirens began to wail. Colonists rushed to defensive positions, though few believed they could truly stop the Vaxtari ships. Dr. Rivera hurried Amy to the medical center. Linda refused to leave her daughter's side, holding the small hand as monitors were attached and scans were taken. "Her brain activity is stabilizing," Rivera said, studying the readings. "Whatever they were doing to her, the effects seemed temporary." Linda smoothed Amy's hair back from her forehead. "Will she be okay?" "I think so," the doctor replied. "She needs rest now. Her body has been through a serious trauma." Frank entered the medical center, his face grim. "How is she?" "She'll recover," Linda said, not taking her eyes off Amy. "Good, because we need to evacuate now." Frank's voice was urgent. "The Vaxtari ships will be here in minutes. They're jamming our communications, but before they did, we received a message from Earth." Linda finally looked up. "What did it say?" 3 words. "Hold. Help coming." Outside, the colony's makeshift defense teams prepared for battle. They had mining explosives, some modified tools as weapons, and a few old guns from Earth. Nothing that could stop a Vaxtari warship. "We need to get everyone to the emergency shelters," Frank said. "They're built into the bedrock. They might survive an orbital bombardment." Linda looked down at Amy, now sleeping peacefully. "What about the children from the facility? The aliens?" "Already, in the medical transport bay. Elena is preparing them for evacuation." Frank put his hand on Linda's shoulder. "We need to move, Linda, now." They carefully transferred Amy to a stretcher. As they wheeled her toward the emergency shelter entrance, the colony shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. "They're starting to attack," Frank said. "We need to hurry." The colony's central plaza was chaotic as people rushed toward the shelters. Parents carried children, others helped the elderly. Despite the panic, there was a strange order to it all. These people had lived under Vaxtari rule for years. They knew how to survive. Another blast rocked the colony, stronger this time. A section of the dome cracked and warning lights flashed. "Dome integrity at 60%, a computerized voice announced. As they reached the shelter entrance, Elena ran up to them. "Frank, you need to see this." She held up a small communication device, one of the few still working despite the jamming. On its screen, they could see the space above New Hope. The 5 Vaxtari ships had taken up attack positions, their weapons charging. But behind them, emerging from faster-than-light travel, were ships, human ships, dozens of them, then hundreds. "My God," Frank whispered. "Where did they all come from?" The largest human vessel dwarfed even the Vaxtari ships. It moved into position above the colony, between the Vaxtari fleet and the planet's surface. "The ships look strange," Linda said, studying the screen. "They're not like any Earth vessels I've seen before." "Because they're new," Elena explained. "Our message didn't just go to Earth's government. It went to everyone. And apparently, Earth has been preparing for this moment for a long time." On the screen, they watched as the human ships surrounded the Vaxtari vessels. No shots were fired, yet. A new voice came through the communicator, breaking through the jamming. "New Hope Colony, this is Admiral Peter Weaver of the Earth Defense. Fleet Flagship Vengeance, do you copy?" Linda gasped. "Peter, my Peter." Frank stared at her. "Your husband? But he died in the pacification operation." Linda's hand shook as she took the communicator. "This is Linda Weaver of New Hope Colony. Peter, is that really you?" "Linda." The voice broke slightly. "Thank God you're alive. Is Amy with you?" "Yes," Linda said, tears streaming down her face. "She's hurt, but she'll recover. Peter, we thought you were dead. Not dead, captured, along with thousands of others. They've been keeping us on prison ships, using us for labor and experiments." Peter's voice hardened. "We were rescued 6, months ago by a resistance group. Earth has been building this fleet in secret for years, hidden in the asteroid belt. We've been waiting for the right moment. And our message was it, Frank realized. Yes, proof of what the Vaxtari were doing to human children. To all children. It united Earth like nothing before. Peter paused. The Vaxtari ships are hailing us. Stand by. The communication went silent. Linda looked down at Amy, still sleeping peacefully, despite the chaos around them. He's alive, she whispered. Amy's father is alive, Frank squeezed her shoulder. This changes everything. The colony shook again as another blast hit the dome. Warning alarms blared. Dome integrity at 40%. Evacuation recommended. We need to get below, Elena insisted. They wheeled Amy's stretcher into the shelter, where hundreds of colonists were already gathered. The heavy doors sealed behind them, muffling the sounds of destruction above. Inside the shelter's command center, they could still monitor what was happening through backup systems. The screen showed the human and Vaxtari fleets facing off in orbit. Something's happening, Frank said, pointing to the display. The Vaxtari ships were moving, trying to maneuver around the human fleet to continue their attack on the colony. The human ships matched their movements, keeping themselves between the Vaxtari and the planet. Then, without warning, the subjugator fired on the human flagship. What followed was unlike any space battle they could have imagined. The human ships didn't just fight back. They dominated. Their weapons cut through Vaxtari shields as if they weren't there. Their own defenses absorbed Vaxtari fire without damage. How is this possible? Elena asked, watching in amazement. 50 years, Frank said quietly. 50 years of studying their technology, finding their weaknesses. Earth was never as helpless as the Vaxtari thought. Within minutes, 3 of the 5 Vaxtari ships were disabled, including the subjugator. The remaining 2 surrendered. The communicator activated again. New Hope Colony. This is Admiral Weaver. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We're sending troops to secure the colony and medical teams to assist your wounded. Linda picked up the communicator. Peter, what happens now? The Imperium will send more ships. Let them come, Peter replied confidently. This isn't just about New Hope anymore. Every human colony is rising up, and we're not alone. The Aurelians, the Torva, the Makari, all the species the Vaxtari have, oppressed for centuries. They're fighting back too. Frank looked at the screen where human troops were already landing outside the damaged dome. Can we win against the entire Imperium? We already are winning, Peter said. The Vaxtari ruled through terror because they knew they couldn't control us through force alone. Now that the fear is gone, their empire is crumbling. The shelter. Doors opened, and human soldiers entered. They wore advanced armor unlike anything the colonists had seen before. Medical teams followed, immediately attending to the wounded. Linda sat beside Amy's stretcher as a doctor examined her. The girl's eyes fluttered open. Mom? She said weakly. I'm here, sweetheart. Linda smiled through her tears. The purple lights were bad, Amy said. I know, honey. But they're gone now. Did we win? Linda looked up at the screen. We're human. Ships now surrounded New Hope, protecting it. After 50 years of oppression, humanity had finally stood up against its tormentors. And they had done it not for power or revenge, but for a child, for all children. Yes, Linda said, holding her daughter's hand. We won. Above them, the first transport from the Vengeance landed inside the colony. Peter Weaver stepped out, scanning the crowds until he saw his wife and daughter. For a moment, he stood perfectly, still as if afraid they might disappear. Then he ran to them, gathering them both in his arms. Throughout the galaxy, the message spread from world to world, species to species. The Vaxtari Imperium was falling, not because they had faced a more powerful enemy, but because they had made one fatal mistake. They had taken a human child, and Earth had risen.
The war had raged across the galaxy for centuries. The Zarkari Dominion, an empire of conquest and terror, had crushed every species in its path. Planets fell. Civilizations burned. Resistance was a joke. There was no fighting back against the might of the Zarkari war machine. Their technology was unrivaled. Their soldiers, genetically engineered for war, knew no fear. Every species they encountered either submitted or was wiped from existence. No one could stand against them. Then the humans arrived. At first, the Zarkari didn't even notice. Humanity was insignificant, a minor species from a backwater planet in an unremarkable solar system. They had only just begun to explore beyond their own system, their ships primitive, their weapons laughable. The Dominion barely acknowledged their existence. That was their first mistake. It started with a single battle, a minor skirmish, really, barely worth recording. A Zarkari fleet had arrived to claim a small, barren world on the edge of their ever-expanding empire. They expected no resistance. The planet had no valuable resources, no major colonies, just a few scattered human settlers. A formality. The fleet was obliterated. At first, the Dominion thought it was a fluke. Maybe the humans had gotten lucky. Maybe there was some anomaly in the system that had disrupted their ships. They sent a second fleet, larger this time. It never returned. Then the reports started coming in. Human ships, small and agile, striking like ghosts before vanishing into the void. Troops that fought with a ferocity that defied all logic. Traps, ambushes, tactics that ignored every rule of war the Zarkari had come to expect. They did not fight like the others. They fought to win. No species had ever fought back like this before. No one had ever resisted so stubbornly. When the Dominion conquered a world, the defeated either surrendered or perished. But the humans? They did neither. When their cities fell, they retreated to the forests and mountains, waging war from the shadows. When their fleets were outmatched, they struck where the Dominion was weakest, crippling supply lines, destroying strategic points, turning victory into chaos. And they did something no other species had ever done. They adapted. Every battle, every loss, every skirmish, the humans learned. They studied Zarkari tactics, stole their technology, and improved it. They fought dirty. They exploited weaknesses no one had even realized existed. They used weapons that shouldn't have worked, strategies that should have failed. And yet, battle after battle, the impossible kept happening. They won. Not all at once. Not everywhere. But the Dominion, for the first time in its long history, felt something new. Something they had never known before. Fear. Because no matter how many ships they sent, how many troops they deployed, the humans didn't break. They didn't surrender. They didn't run. They just got angrier. And the war was only beginning. The Supreme War Council of the Zarkari Dominion gathered in the Grand Chamber, their towering reptilian forms casting long shadows over the holographic war map. A dozen star systems blinked red, systems where their fleets had either vanished or returned in shambles. The word human was being whispered now, no longer as an afterthought, but as a growing threat. Overlord Zetzarak, leader of the Dominion, slammed his clawed fist against the armrest of his throne. "Explain this," he growled, his deep voice rumbling through the chamber. "How is it possible that an inferior species, barely capable of interstellar travel, has managed to destroy entire fleets?" Silence filled the room. No one wanted to be the first to speak. The Zarkari had conquered hundreds of species, broken thousands of civilizations. The idea that a race as young as humanity could stand against them was unthinkable. And yet, the reports spoke for themselves. Finally, Admiral Corvex stepped forward, his yellow eyes filled with unease. "The humans do not fight like the others," he admitted. "They do not break under pressure. They do not surrender when all seems lost. They are..." unpredictable. Zetzarik narrowed his gaze. Explain. The Admiral hesitated, then activated a battle record. A holographic display flickered to life, showing the last moments of the Second Assault Fleet. Zarkari dreadnoughts, each capable of leveling a city from orbit, had been ambushed in the asteroid belt of the Theta-6 system. The battle should have been simple. The humans were outgunned and outnumbered. The Dominion's fleet had moved in with overwhelming force, their weapons ready to fire. But something had happened. A swarm of human ships had emerged from the asteroid field, moving erratically, impossibly fast, weaving between the massive dreadnoughts. Instead of engaging in a traditional fleet battle, they had ignored the Zarkari fighters and gone straight for their capital ships. Then the explosions started. Korvex pointed to the hologram. The humans do not fight with honor. They use deception, misdirection, and sabotage. They strike at our supply chains, disable our communication relays, and target our command ships instead of engaging in direct combat. They attack where they are least expected, then vanish before we can retaliate. Zetzarik clenched his jaw. Cowards. No, my overlord, Korvex said slowly, his voice thick with something dangerously close to respect. Survivors of these battles report that humans fight with terrifying determination. Even when outnumbered, they refuse to flee. They destroy their own ships rather than allow them to be captured. Their ground troops fight to the last soldier. They do not seek surrender. They seek victory at any cost. Zetzarik narrowed his gaze. You mean to say they fight like us? Korvex hesitated. No, my overlord. They fight worse. They fight as if every battle is their last. And they learn from each engagement. Their weapons are improving at an alarming rate. They are modifying their ships with stolen Dominion technology. Their strategy is evolving with every defeat we inflict. The room fell silent. The implications were clear. The Zarkari had always fought knowing they were the strongest. Their victories were inevitable. But now, for the first time, they faced an enemy that did not see them as gods of war. The humans saw them as prey. Zetzarik exhaled sharply. Then we will burn their homeworld. We will make an example of them so no other species dares resist us. Korvex hesitated again. What is it? Zetzarik snapped. The Admiral hesitated before answering. We tried that, my overlord. A fleet was dispatched to Sol. They never arrived. We lost contact before they reached human space. Zetzarik's eyes darkened. Then send another fleet. Another pause. Korvex swallowed hard. My overlord, that was our largest fleet. The room fell deathly quiet. For the first time in the history of the Dominion, the Zarkari faced an enemy they could not understand. They had always been the apex predators. But now something was hunting them, and the humans were just getting started. The Zarkari Dominion had always viewed war as a predictable equation. More ships, more soldiers, more firepower. These had always been the key to victory. But against the humans, that equation was crumbling. The losses were not just military, they were psychological. Entire Zarkari fleets had vanished in deep space, their last transmissions filled with confusion and panic. Supply depots exploded without warning. Generals were assassinated in their own fortresses. The humans fought like shadows, striking in ways the Dominion had never encountered before. They did not fight for survival. They fought for total annihilation of their enemy. And now, they were coming for the Dominion's core worlds. Overlord Zetzarik stood in his personal war chamber, staring at the holographic projection of the Dominion's star maps. The once expanding empire now had wounds, systems blinking red with human incursions. They had advanced faster than anyone thought possible, capturing Zarkari vessels, stealing technology, using the very weapons of the Dominion against them. It was infuriating. "Where are they now?" Zetzarak growled, turning to Admiral Corvex, who stood stiffly before him. Corvex swallowed before activating a display. "We detected a human fleet moving through the Nabari expanse, sir. It's moving fast. Too fast. We cannot predict their trajectory." Zetzarak narrowed his eyes. "How many ships?" The Admiral hesitated. We don't know, my overlord." A silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken dread. "You mean to tell me," Zetzarak said slowly, "that we, the mightiest empire in the galaxy, do not know where our enemy is? That we do not even know how many of them there are?" Corvex bowed his head. "They are unpredictable, my overlord. They do not follow any known military doctrine. They spread disinformation, fake fleet movements, and use tactics that— "Enough!" Zetzarak snapped. His claws dug into the stone of his throne. "Tell me what we do know." The Admiral took a deep breath. "We know that they have taken our dreadnought schematics and improved upon them. They have adapted our energy shielding into their ships. We know that they are embedding spies within our ranks. Several Dominion officers have been exposed as human sympathizers, their minds poisoned by the enemy's lies." Zetzarak's lips curled in disgust. "Weaklings." Corvex hesitated before delivering the worst news. "And we know they are heading for Zaltoran." Zetzarak stiffened. Zaltoran was one of the Dominion's core worlds, a planet never touched by war. It was the home of their greatest shipyards, the backbone of their military might. If the humans struck there, it would be a disaster beyond measure. "When will they arrive?" "We don't know." The Overlord let out a low, dangerous growl. He had never felt this kind of frustration before. The humans were ghosts, waging a war on their own terms. But ghosts or not, they would not bring the Dominion to its knees. "We will be ready for them," Zetzarak declared, standing tall. "Send every available fleet to Zaltoran. Deploy planetary defenses, tighten security, and bring in the Shadow Guard. The humans will come, and when they do, we will crush them." Corvex hesitated again. "With all due respect, my overlord, the humans know we will defend Zaltoran with everything we have. They have never attacked a planet directly. It's not their way." Zetzarak narrowed his eyes. "You think this is a distraction?" Corvex nodded grimly. "I believe they are already here." A sudden explosion rocked the capital city. The entire chamber shook violently. Sirens wailed, alarms blared. The walls trembled as distant shockwaves thundered through the atmosphere. Zetzarak's blood ran cold. The humans had already arrived, and the war for the Dominion had begun. Panic spread through the capital like wildfire. The Zarkari had never known true fear. Until now. Zaltoran was supposed to be untouchable. Its planetary defenses were the strongest in the Dominion. Its shipyards churned out warships by the thousands, and its soldiers were battle-hardened veterans. But none of that mattered now. The humans had struck at the heart of the Empire, and no one had seen them coming. Zetzarak stormed toward the war room, his claws clicking against the polished obsidian floor. His personal guards surrounded him, their weapons drawn, their expressions tense. The city outside was in chaos. Fires raged across the skyline, black smoke billowing into the atmosphere. Explosions echoed through the streets as defense turrets fired blindly into the darkness, searching for an enemy that refused to reveal itself. The moment he entered the war room, Admiral Corvex turned to him, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. "My overlord, we've lost contact with the planetary shield generators. The humans have disabled them. I don't know how, but they were deactivated from the inside," a new voice interrupted. Every Zarkari turned, weapons raised, as a lone figure stepped from the shadows. A human. The guards moved instantly, aiming their plasma rifles, but the figure did not flinch. The human stood tall, clad in a dark combat suit, his face partially obscured by a tactical visor. The air around him hummed with a quiet intensity, as if he had walked into the chamber knowing he belonged there. Zetzarak narrowed his eyes. "You are either the bravest or the most foolish creature in this room." The human smirked. "Bit of both, probably." Corvex's claws twitched over his sidearm. "How did you get in here?" "Your people like to think they're invincible," the human said, tilting his head. "That was your first mistake. You assumed we'd fight like everyone else. You assumed we'd play by your rules." He gestured toward the chaos outside. "We don't—" Zetzarak studied him, his rage burning beneath the surface. This was no ordinary soldier. This human had walked into the heart of the Dominion's military command, standing before the Overlord himself, as if it were just another day. "You think this stunt will change the outcome of the war?" Zetzarak sneered. "We are the Zarkari. We have ruled this galaxy for centuries. We will erase your kind from existence." The human smirk didn't fade. If anything, it widened. "Yeah, see, that's the thing. You don't get it." He tapped something on his wrist. Outside, the sky screamed. 100 bright streaks burned through the atmosphere, cutting through the darkness like falling stars. They moved too fast for the Zarkari defenses to react. Ships, drop pods, attack drones, all descending upon the city in a perfectly coordinated assault. The invasion had already begun. Zetzarak's eyes flared with rage. "You—" Before he could finish, the human lunged. He moved impossibly fast, faster than any Zarkari had ever seen a human move. One of the guards fired, but the human twisted out of the way, closing the distance in an instant. A blade appeared in his hand, curved, wickedly sharp. And then there was blood. The first guard fell, clutching his throat. The second went down a heartbeat later, his rifle clattering to the floor. Corvex barely had time to draw his weapon before the human was upon him, twisting his wrist, slamming him to the ground. In a matter of seconds, the war room was silent. The only ones left standing were Zetzarak and the human. The Overlord growled, his muscles tensing. "Who are you?" The human wiped the blood from his blade and sheathed it. Then, finally, he pulled off his visor, revealing sharp blue eyes that burned with something Zetzarak had never seen in any of his enemies before. Amusement. "You can call me Captain Ryan Carter," he said casually, "but honestly, doesn't really matter." He stepped forward, stopping just a foot away from the Zarkari leader. "Because by the time this night is over," Carter said with a grin, "your empire is going to burn." Zetzarak lunged. His claws lashed out, aiming to tear the insolent human apart, but Carter was faster. The captain ducked under the Overlord's swipe and drove his fist into the Zarkari's gut. The impact made Zetzarak stagger, his massive form recoiling from the unexpected force. Humans were not supposed to be this strong. The Overlord recovered quickly, roaring as he swung again. This time Carter didn't dodge. He caught the incoming strike, twisting the Zarkari's arm in a way that sent pain lancing through his joints. Zetzarak snarled and retaliated with a brutal headbutt, but Carter was already moving, ducking low and sweeping the Overlord's legs out from under him. Zetzarak crashed onto the floor. For the first time in his long, blood-soaked reign, he felt something alien, something impossible. He felt outmatched. Carter exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "You guys really need to stop underestimating us," he said casually. "You keep thinking we're weak, that we'll just roll over like everyone else you've conquered." He knelt beside the fallen Overlord, tilting his head. "But here's the problem with that." He grabbed Zetzarak's throat and pulled him up, forcing the warlord to look him in the eye. "You pushed us too far." Outside, the city burned. Human forces had landed in full force. Dropships swarmed the skies, releasing squads of heavily armed soldiers. Zarkari defenses were collapsing as human shock troopers moved through the streets, executing precision strikes that crippled command centers and weapons depots. And the people, those who had lived under Dominion rule for generations, were rising. Zaltoran had been home to millions of conquered species. They had been slaves, workers, cannon fodder for the Zarkari war machine. But now, inspired by the arrival of the human forces, they were rebelling. Riots had broken out across the capital. Entire Zarkari garrisons were being overrun by those they had once oppressed. The Dominion was losing control. Zetzarek gritted his teeth, glaring at Carter. "You think you can destroy us?" he growled. "We are eternal. Our empire will never fall." Carter smirked. "Yeah? Tell that to your burning city?" As if on cue, another explosion rocked the war room. The walls trembled, dust falling from the ceiling as a section of the palace crumbled under the onslaught. Zetzarek knew then. This wasn't just an attack. It was the end. "Kill me," the Overlord spat. "Go on, human. Finish it." Carter's smirk faded. He studied the defeated warlord for a long moment, then shook his head. "Nah, you don't get off that easy." He reached into his belt, pulled out a small device, and pressed a button. A holographic transmission flickered to life. Across the city, every screen, every communication hub, every device capable of displaying an image showed the same thing. Zetzarek, on his knees, defeated, with Captain Carter standing over him. The message was clear. The Dominion was broken, the war was over, and humanity had won. The Dominion crumbled in a way no one had ever imagined possible. Across the galaxy, word spread faster than light. Zetzarek, the undefeated, the eternal ruler of the Zarkari Dominion, had fallen. Not in glorious combat, not in a final stand against overwhelming odds, but on his knees, humiliated, defeated by the very species the Dominion had once dismissed as irrelevant. The effects were immediate. Entire systems revolted overnight. Zarkari warlords, once loyal to the Dominion, now saw an opportunity for power and turned on each other. Slave worlds, long under the heel of their masters, rose in open rebellion. The once feared Zarkari fleets fractured as admirals abandoned the empire to save themselves. Humanity didn't need to destroy the Dominion. They had simply lit the match and let it burn from within. On Zaltoran, Captain Ryan Carter stood atop the ruined balcony of the Overlord's palace, watching the fires of revolution spread across the city. Human soldiers moved through the streets below, not as conquerors, but as liberators. The people, those who had been forced to serve under the Dominion for centuries, rallied behind them, seizing weapons, taking control of buildings once owned by their Zarkari oppressors. Carter turned as his comm device crackled to life. "This is General Vasquez," a familiar voice came through. "We've secured the planetary shipyards. Zarkari forces are in full retreat. What's the situation in the palace?" Carter glanced at the battered form of Zetzarek, now shackled and surrounded by human guards. The once mighty Overlord sat in silence, his reptilian eyes filled with something his species had never known: defeat. "We got him," Carter replied. "It's over." There was a pause on the other end before Vasquez let out a small chuckle. "Damn, Carter, you really pulled it off." Carter smirked. "Told you we would." A new voice cut in. Admiral Hayes, overseeing the battle from orbit. "Intel suggests Zarkari High Command is in chaos. The remaining Dominion forces are splintering. This is the beginning of the end for them." Carter nodded to himself. "Good. Then it's time we finish what we started." The fall of Zaltoran was just the beginning. Within months, the Dominion collapsed entirely. Without Zetzarek, without the terror that had kept their empire together, the Zarkari were nothing more than warlords fighting over scraps. Former slave species took their revenge. The fleets that had once burned worlds now found themselves hunted. Their own ships turned against them. And humanity? They didn't claim the Dominion's throne. They didn't replace one empire with another. Instead, they ensured that no species would ever suffer under such tyranny again. They armed the former slaves, helped them build their own defenses, and made one thing very clear to the galaxy. No one would ever stand unchallenged again, because the humans were watching. And if another empire tried to rise? Well, everyone remembered what happened the last time someone underestimated humanity. The Dominion was dead. Its fleets, once feared across the galaxy, were now scattered remnants fighting over scraps. Its once mighty warlords had turned on each other, clawing for power in the ruins of their fallen empire. The slave worlds they had ruled with an iron fist were now free, their people armed and hungry for vengeance. And yet, for humanity, the war was far from over, because victory wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Captain Ryan Carter stood aboard the Saber, his personal warship, staring out at the endless expanse of space. Below, Zaltoran burned, a world once considered untouchable, now reduced to ruins. Humanity's victory had shattered the Zarkari, but in the void left behind, something new was rising. "Sir," came a voice behind him. It was Lieutenant Avery, his second-in-command. "We just got a transmission from Admiral Hayes. There's been another uprising on Nirafor. Former Dominion warlords are trying to carve out their own territories." Carter sighed. "Let me guess. They're using old Zarkari tech, recruiting desperate mercenaries, and trying to claim power for themselves?" Avery nodded grimly. "Exactly. And it's not just Nirafor. We're seeing the same thing in over a dozen systems. The Dominion might be gone, but warlords are filling the vacuum." Carter exhaled through his nose. He had known this would happen. The fall of an empire wasn't a clean break. It was chaos. And if humanity didn't act fast, the galaxy would fall back into the same cycle of oppression under new rulers. "Have the other fleets reported in?" he asked. Avery nodded. "General Vasquez is leading peacekeeping efforts in the core ward systems. Admiral Hayes is moving to secure the trade lanes. But sir—" She hesitated. Carter turned to her. "Spit it out, Lieutenant." "It's Zetzarek," she said. "He escaped." Silence. Carter felt his blood run cold. "How?" Avery's face was grim. "We don't know. He was being transported to the War Tribunal on Terra Prime, but the escort ship never made it. No distress signals, no wreckage, just gone." Carter clenched his fists. He should have killed the bastard when he had the chance. "Intel suggests he's in hiding," Avery continued, "somewhere in the outer reaches. And there's something else. Our spies intercepted a message from a surviving Zarkari fleet. It was a call to arms, a rallying cry." Carter narrowed his eyes. "For what?" Avery hesitated, then played the intercepted transmission. The guttural voice of a Zarkari officer crackled through the ship's speakers. "The Overlord lives. The Dominion will rise again. The humans will pay in blood." Carter exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. Zetzarek was still out there, and he wasn't done fighting. This war wasn't over. Not yet. The hunt for Zetzarek had begun. Across the shattered remains of the Dominion, human forces and their allies scoured the stars, searching for the missing warlord. But he was a ghost. Every time they thought they had him cornered, he slipped away. Warlords loyal to the old Dominion had gone into hiding, gathering their strength in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Ryan Carter stood in the dimly lit war room aboard the Saber, studying the latest intelligence reports. A dozen systems had fallen into chaos as rogue Zarkari fleets resurfaced, striking at human supply lines and sabotaging newly formed governments. It was a war of attrition, one Carter had no intention of losing. The door hissed open, and Lieutenant Avery stepped in. "Sir, we just received intel from one of our deep cover operatives. They've found something." Carter turned to her. "Where?" Avery placed a datapad on the table, bringing up a holographic star map. A single system blinked red. Varrock's Maw. Carter frowned. "That's deep in uncharted space. What the hell is he doing out there?" Avery hesitated. "According to our operative, Zetzarek isn't just hiding. He's rebuilding." Silence filled the war room. Carter exhaled sharply. "How many ships does he have?" "We don't have exact numbers, but our best estimate puts it at nearly 200 warships, and—" She hesitated. Carter's eyes narrowed. "And what?" Avery tapped the console, bringing up blurry surveillance images. Massive structures loomed over a barren planet, surrounded by swarms of smaller ships. Even in the grainy footage, the scale of the operation was terrifying. "He's building a fleet," Avery said quietly. "A new Dominion. And, sir, he has human technology." Carter's blood ran cold. Zetzarek wasn't just trying to reclaim his empire. He was adapting, learning from his mistakes, using stolen human weapons, ships, and tactics to wage a new kind of war, one humanity might not be ready for. Carter straightened, his jaw tightening. "Get the fleet ready. We end this before it begins." Avery hesitated. "Sir, if we go in unprepared, this could turn into another full-scale war." Carter met her gaze, his expression hard as steel. "Then we make sure it's a war they don't survive." The Saber dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of Varrock's Maw, the uncharted system where Zetzarek had been hiding. The vast expanse of space stretched before them, broken only by a dying red star and a barren, storm-racked planet below. It should have been empty, but it wasn't. Carter stood on the bridge, staring at the sight before him. Hundreds of Zarkari warships hung in orbit like predators waiting to pounce. Their hulls had been retrofitted with human technology, sleeker designs, enhanced energy shielding, weapons far beyond anything the old Dominion had ever wielded. This wasn't a remnant. This was a new Dominion. A cold weight settled in Carter's gut. Zetzarek had done more than survive. He had adapted. And now, he was ready for war. "Sir," Avery's voice cut through the tense silence. "Enemy ships are locking weapons. We're being hailed." Carter exhaled sharply. "Put it through." The screen flickered to life, and there he was. Zetzarek, the overlord of the Dominion, very much alive and standing in the command chamber of his new flagship. His reptilian face was marked with fresh scars, his golden eyes burning with something Carter had never seen before. Not arrogance, not anger, confidence. "So," Zetzarek rumbled, "you finally found me." Carter folded his arms. "You're not that hard to find when you start building an invasion fleet." Zetzarek let out a low chuckle. "Did you think I would crawl away to die in some forgotten system? No, Captain. I learned from our last encounter. The Dominion fell because it relied too much on brute force, on tradition. But humanity, you fight to win. You evolve." He leaned forward. "So I evolved too." Carter felt a slow burn of unease in his gut. "You really think you can bring back the Dominion?" he asked. "The galaxy hates you. Half your former subjects would rather burn their own planets than see you rule again." Zetzarek's grin widened. "They will not have a choice. I will not repeat the mistakes of the past. The Dominion ruled with fear, but now—" His golden eyes gleamed. "Now I rule with understanding. I know your tactics, Carter, your strategies, and this time I will not be outplayed." The transmission cut. Avery cursed under her breath. "We've got incoming!" Multiple enemy signatures. Fighters, bombers, capital ships. They're launching everything. Carter's hands clenched into fists. This was it. Zetzarik had rebuilt. He had stolen humanity's greatest weapon, adaptation, and now he was coming for them. Carter turned to his crew. All hands to battle stations. The Saber rumbled as it accelerated forward, joining the human fleet as the two armadas clashed. The battle for the future of the galaxy had begun, and this time, only one side would survive. The void of space erupted into chaos. Bright streaks of plasma and missile fire crisscrossed the battlefield as the two fleets clashed. Human warships, sleek and fast, darted between the Zarkari behemoths, launching devastating strikes before retreating into the blackness. But the Zarkari had learned. Their new ships, powered by stolen human technology, moved with terrifying precision, countering maneuvers that had once given humanity the upper hand. This was not the same Dominion, and Ryan Carter knew it. On the bridge of the Saber, Carter gripped the console as the ship lurched violently, narrowly avoiding a blast from an enemy dreadnought. "Shields holding," he barked. "At 60%, Avery called back. "But they've got us figured out. Our usual hit-and-run tactics aren't working like they used to." Carter clenched his jaw. Zetzarik had adapted. Every maneuver, every trick humanity had used to win the First War, he had studied them, countered them. The Overlord wasn't fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting to win. "We're not losing this fight," Carter muttered. "We just need to stop thinking like humans." Avery frowned. "Sir?" Carter's mind raced. The Zarkari had always relied on brute force. That had been their weakness. But Zetzarik had changed the game. He had learned how humans fought, strategically, methodically, using deception and misdirection. So now they needed to stop fighting like humans. They needed to fight like the old Dominion. Carter turned to his weapons officer. "Full fleet-wide transmission, open channel." A moment later, his voice echoed through every human warship. "All ships, listen up. Forget the hit-and-run tactics. Forget precision strikes. We're doing this the old-fashioned way. Head-on, full force, no retreat. I want every battleship, every cruiser, every fighter bearing down on their fleet like a tidal wave. No more tricks, no more stealth." There was a pause. Then Avery's eyes widened in realization. "If Zetzarik thinks we're playing by his new rules, we throw him off by playing by his old ones," she said. Carter nodded. "Exactly. We make him think we're turning into the same kind of empire he used to lead." A grin spread across Avery's face. "And once he starts countering that, we change the rules again." Carter smirked. "Now you're getting it." He turned back to the battlefield as the tide of war shifted. Human ships surged forward in a relentless assault, abandoning their usual elusive tactics. The Zarkari, expecting another precision-based skirmish, were caught off guard. They had spent years preparing for a war of strategy. What they got instead was raw, overwhelming force. Zetzarik's forces hesitated. They adjusted. They tried to counter. And that was their mistake, because the real attack was still coming. "Execute Phase 2, Carter ordered. Across the battlefield, hidden among the wreckage of destroyed ships, human stealth vessels powered up. They had been waiting, silent and unseen, for the perfect moment. And now, as the Zarkari fleet focused on the human onslaught, the assassins struck. Sabotage teams infiltrated Zarkari flagships, detonating core reactors from within. EMP strikes shut down entire wings of enemy fighters. Human commandos boarded key vessels, seizing control in minutes. The battlefield turned into a slaughter. One by one, Zarkari warships faltered, then fell. Their formations crumbled. Their strategies collapsed. And at the center of it all, on his warship, Zetzarik watched his empire die again. The Overlord's voice cracked through the comms. You think this will stop me? He snarled. You think I will break? Carter leaned forward. No, Zetzarek, I think you'll run. And the Overlord did. His flagship, battered, burning, activated its jump drive, vanishing into the void. The remaining Zarkari forces, leaderless, panicked. Some surrendered. Others fled. A few fought to the last breath. But the battle was over, and humanity had won. Again. Hours later, as the fires of war dimmed, Carter stood on the bridge of the Saber, staring into the abyss where Zetzarek had vanished. Avery stepped beside him. He's out there, she said. Carter exhaled. Yeah, and he's not done yet. She crossed her arms. So what now? Carter smirked. Now, we hunt him down, and this time we make sure he stays dead. As the stars stretched before them, the hunt for the last overlord of the Dominion began. The Galactic Council chamber hummed with the quiet murmur of 1,000 alien voices, each representing one of the many species that formed the United Galactic Federation. Towering insectoids, gelatinous beings in containment suits, reptilian warlords, and countless others filled the grand hall. And standing before them, on a raised platform at the very center, was Ambassador Jason Reed, the last human voice in the council. He stood tall, though tension lined his face. The weight of his species' fate pressed heavily upon him. Across from him, Grand Arbiter Zelthoran, a being of the Ziffer Dominion with an elongated skull and shimmering emerald skin, raised a clawed hand. Silence fell upon the chamber. Ambassador Reed, Zelthoran's voice echoed, laced with disdain. The council has deliberated. The vote is unanimous. Humanity is hereby expelled from the United Galactic Federation, effective immediately. A collective murmur swept through the chamber, some species showing satisfaction, others maintaining a neutral stance. Jason, however, remained unfazed. He had expected this. This is a mistake, Jason said, his voice firm but measured. You fear us because we refuse to kneel. You call us reckless because we fight for our own interests. But tell me, which one of you has never placed their own kind first? Zelthoran's nostrils flared. Your kind disrupts the balance. Humans refuse to adhere to our treaties, to our hierarchy. You lack the wisdom of older races and yet demand a seat at the table. Jason smirked. Because we refuse to let stagnant, decaying civilizations dictate our future? He scanned the room. You preach peace, yet half the species here still wage wars in the dark. You say we're too young, yet we've done in 3 centuries what many of you haven't in millennia. A murmur of discontent rippled through the chamber. Some species nodded subtly, but none dared speak in defense of humanity. It was a lost cause. The decision had been made. Zelthoran struck the podium with his staff. Enough. You may leave with what little dignity your kind still has. Jason inhaled sharply and nodded. Fine. You don't want us? You won't have us. But you will regret this. He turned, his boots echoing against the pristine floor as he exited. The humans in attendance followed, silent but seething. Outside the chamber, General Amanda Vasquez, clad in her Earth Defense Fleet uniform, was already waiting with a knowing look. They actually did it, she muttered. Jason sighed. Yeah, they did. She crossed her arms. So what now? Jason's smirk returned, but this time it held something different. Determination. Now? We rewrite the rules. Humanity wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The moment humanity was expelled from the Galactic Council, the wheels of change began turning. Back on Earth, the announcement was met with fury. News broadcasts ran footage of Jason Reed's final stand in the council chamber, replaying his words again and again. Protests erupted across human colonies, not against their leaders, but against the aliens who had cast them aside. The people didn't see this as a loss. They saw it as a declaration of war, one that had yet to be fought. At the Terran High Command on Luna, the most powerful leaders of humanity gathered. Generals, scientists, diplomats, and corporate heads filled the war room. A massive holographic display in the center showed the galactic map, marking every known trade route, resource hub, and strategic location. Jason Reed stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, his face set in stone. "They think they've won by kicking us out," he said, voice calm but cutting. "But we are no longer bound by their rules, their treaties, or their restrictions. They've just given us the one thing we've always thrived on." Admiral Vasquez smirked. "Freedom." "Exactly." Jason pointed at the map. "For years, we've played by their laws, paid their taxes, traded under their tariffs, submitted to their ridiculous regulations. But now we set our own terms." Dr. Elias Carter, head of the Terran Research Division, leaned forward. "Are you saying we should break their technology embargo?" Jason met his gaze. "Not just break it, shatter it." There was a heavy pause before Vasquez grinned. "I like where this is going." For centuries, humanity had been artificially held back. The Council controlled what technology could be developed, what weapons could be built, what ships could be flown beyond designated territories. It was a system designed to keep them under control, to ensure no young race could rise too quickly. But now, with their expulsion, the floodgates had opened. "We don't have their numbers," Vasquez admitted, "but we don't need them. We have adaptability. We innovate faster than any species in the known galaxy." Jason nodded. "And we're about to prove it." Within weeks, Earth's shipyards shifted into overdrive. The next-generation warships, previously held back by bureaucratic red tape, were greenlit for mass production. AI research, once tightly monitored by the Council, advanced at an exponential rate. Experimental weapons that had been locked away due to ethical concerns were finally being tested. Meanwhile, human corporations saw an opportunity of their own. With the Council's restrictions gone, Terran companies expanded aggressively into regions where alien businesses had once dominated. Human privateers, once labeled as mere traders, became something else entirely. Armed merchant fleets secured trade routes, offering protection for a price. It didn't take long for the rest of the galaxy to notice. The first real confrontation came when the Zephyr Dominion attempted to seize a former Terran colony, believing humanity to be too weak to defend it. They were wrong. The new Terran fleet arrived in force, equipped with weapons the Dominion had never seen before. Their ships were faster, their tactics unpredictable, their AI-driven targeting systems flawless. The battle lasted less than an hour. When the dust settled, the Dominion had lost an entire fleet. Humanity had lost a single ship. The message was clear. The Council had thrown humanity out. Now humanity would show them why that was their greatest mistake. The defeat of the Zephyr Dominion fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time in history, a younger species had not only defied an elder race, but utterly humiliated them in battle. The Council tried to downplay the loss, calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding, but behind closed doors, they were panicking. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity was just getting started. Jason Reed stood on the observation deck of the Olympus shipyards, watching as the first of the new Dreadnought-class warships was completed. The HSS Vengeance floated in the void like a sleeping giant, its sleek black hull bristling with weaponry the Council had long deemed too dangerous for developing species. Admiral Vasquez joined him, a datapad in her hand. "We've just finished retrofitting the first batch of ships. AI-assisted targeting, electromagnetic shielding, next-gen railguns. We're years ahead of what the Council allows their own fleets to use." Jason smirked. "Good, because they're about to come knocking." The Council had underestimated humanity for too long. They had treated them as an upstart species, a minor inconvenience to be dismissed. But now they had no choice but to take Earth seriously. And just as Jason predicted, the Council's response came swiftly. A delegation arrived in Sol space, led by none other than Grand Arbiter Zelthoran himself. The massive Council flagship, Eminence, dwarfed the human escort ships as it took position in high orbit over Earth. Jason and Vasquez took a shuttle up to the Eminence, meeting the delegation in the Council's signature grand, opulent halls. Zelthoran stood at the head of the room, his emerald-green eyes filled with barely concealed contempt. "You have gone too far, Ambassador Reed." Jason chuckled, crossing his arms. "You threw us out, Arbiter. Did you think we'd just roll over and die?" the Zephyr leader hissed. "You have violated interstellar law. You have developed weapons forbidden to lesser species. You have conducted unauthorized military actions against a member race of the Council." Vasquez stepped forward, her voice cold. "We defended our people, something you failed to do when you let the Dominion attack us." The Council members murmured among themselves, clearly unprepared for this level of defiance. For centuries, younger species had always bowed to the Council's authority. But humanity? Humanity had evolved in war. They had survived through resilience. They didn't back down. Zelthoran's voice turned sharper. "You must cease your militarization immediately and submit to Council oversight, or face consequences." Jason's smirk widened. "Or what?" The Arbiter's expression darkened. "The Council will impose sanctions. We will cut your trade, isolate your species, and if necessary, we will enforce compliance." Vasquez scoffed. "You're threatening us with war?" "No," Zelthoran said coldly. "I am offering you a chance to avoid one." Jason exhaled slowly. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every alien present. They thought they still had power over humanity. They thought their threats carried weight. They were wrong. Jason took a step forward. "You don't get it, do you?" His voice was quiet, but it carried through the chamber. "We don't need your trade. We don't need your protection, and we sure as hell don't need your permission." Zelthoran's jaw clenched. "You are making a mistake." Jason shook his head. "Number, you made the mistake." His voice hardened. "You thought throwing us out would weaken us, that we would beg to be let back in, that we would fall in line like every species before us. But that's not how humanity works." He turned, starting for the exit. Before leaving, he glanced over his shoulder. "You wanted us out? Fine. But from now on, humanity answers to no one." With that, Jason and Vasquez left the Council chambers, leaving behind a room filled with stunned silence. Back on Earth, the declaration was made official. Humanity was no longer a part of the United Galactic Federation. They were something new, independent, unrestricted. And for the first time in history, an outsider species would no longer follow galactic law. They would write it. The Council's delegation returned to their homeworlds with grim expressions, their threats having fallen on deaf ears. Humanity had made its stance clear. They would not be governed, they would not be restrained, and they would certainly not bow. The response from the galactic community was immediate and divided. Some elder species, like the Zephyr Dominion, clamored for war, demanding swift and brutal retaliation to correct humanity's defiance. Others, however, saw something different. Opportunity. Within weeks of the Council's failed ultimatum, new communications flooded into Terran High Command. Species that had long suffered under the bureaucratic stranglehold of the United Galactic Federation reached out, offering to establish trade and military alliances with humanity. They had seen Earth's rapid technological advancements, their unpredictable and devastating military strategies, and, more importantly, their refusal to be controlled. To these species, Humanity was no longer just a rebellious upstart. They were an inspiration. Jason Reed stood in the command center of the newly established Terran Sovereignty headquarters, scanning through the incoming messages. Vasquez stood beside him, reading over a report on recent fleet movements. "You're not gonna believe this," she muttered, handing him a datapad. Jason skimmed through the file, his brows raising slightly. The Zorvath clans, a nomadic warrior species that had fought the Council for centuries, had just declared their formal support for humanity. They weren't alone. Over a dozen smaller species, from independent merchant guilds to disenfranchised border worlds, had begun aligning themselves with Earth. Jason smirked. Well, looks like we're not the only ones tired of the Council's bullshit." Vasquez chuckled. "And the best part? The Council can't do a damn thing about it." Without the legal bindings of the Federation, humanity had become something dangerous, an unregulated, fast-moving powerhouse that no longer played by the rules. Meanwhile, deep in the Zephyr Dominion, Grand Arbiter Zelthorin stood before a gathering of warlords, his frustration boiling over. "Humanity has gone too far," he snarled, slamming his clawed hand against the table. "They have corrupted lesser species, expanded beyond their means, and now openly challenge our authority." One of the Dominion's admirals, a scarred reptilian brute, growled in response. "Then we do what should have been done long ago. We crush them." Zelthorin exhaled, composing himself. "Yes, but not yet." His emerald eyes gleamed with calculation. "Humanity fights like a cornered beast. We have seen what happens when they are underestimated." The warlords nodded grimly. The disastrous loss of an entire Dominion fleet had been a harsh lesson. "We will not make the same mistake." Zelthorin's voice was cold. "We will strike not with brute force, but with precision. We will divide them, break their alliances, bleed them slowly, and when the time is right—" His lips curled into something that might have been a smile. "We will erase them from history." Back on Earth, humanity was preparing for the inevitable. War was coming, and this time, they would not be caught unprepared. Jason stood in the war room, staring at the galactic map. His people had accomplished in months what others had failed to do in centuries. They had disrupted the balance of power, challenged the old empires, and shattered the illusion of Council supremacy. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy wasn't ready for what was coming next. Because now, humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. The war didn't begin with a grand invasion. There was no declaration, no formal battle lines drawn. Instead, it started in the shadows. First, human trade convoys began vanishing without a trace. Merchant ships, once escorted by lightly armed patrol craft, were ambushed in deep space. Sensor records showed nothing, just ships disappearing mid-transit. Then came the sabotage. Supply depots on distant colonies erupted in flames. Data networks crashed, infrastructure failed, and entire communication grids went dark. Someone was testing them, probing their weaknesses. Jason Reed watched the reports pile up on his terminal. "They're trying to bleed us dry before the real war even starts." Admiral Vasquez nodded grimly. "Zelthorin isn't an idiot. He knows that if we fight head-on, we'll punch above our weight, so he's playing dirty." Jason exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Good." Vasquez frowned. "Good?" Jason met her eyes, a cold smirk playing on his lips. "It means they're scared." Across the stars, humanity's enemies lurked in the darkness, thinking they were clever. What they didn't understand was that humans thrived in the shadows. They had built entire industries around cyber warfare, black ops, and unconventional tactics. If the Dominion wanted to play that game, humanity would beat them at it. The first move came from the Ghost Division, an elite human intelligence network operating outside conventional military command. They tracked the missing convoys to a secret Dominion refueling station hidden in the nebula, of Y-374. A squadron of human stealth ships, equipped with advanced cloaking technology, slipped into the nebula undetected. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. Human operatives hacked into the station's systems, triggering internal explosions before the enemy even knew they were under attack. Not a single Dominion ship escaped, but humanity didn't stop there. Sabotage teams infiltrated Dominion shipyards, planting viral AI codes that disrupted entire production lines. Advanced human AI, no longer restricted by Council laws, launched relentless cyber attacks against Dominion war networks. Black Ops teams tracked down enemy spies, eliminating them with ruthless precision. For every human ship lost, 5 Dominion assets burned. Zelthorin's frustration grew. He had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt. The war of attrition was no longer in his favor. If he wanted to break humanity, he had only one choice: full-scale war. And that was exactly what Jason Reed had been waiting for. On Earth, the final piece of humanity's defense was completed: the Revenant Protocol, a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The moment the Dominion committed to open war, they would face not just humanity's military, but an unstoppable force of AI-driven warships, cybernetic-enhanced soldiers, and weapons so advanced that the Council had once forbidden them from even being researched. Humanity had been shackled for too long. Now they were unleashed, and for the first time in history, the galaxy would learn what it truly meant to fear humans. The Dominion struck with overwhelming force. Hundreds of warships emerged from hyperspace in a coordinated assault across human space. Zephyr dreadnoughts, massive city-sized vessels bristling with weapons, led the charge. Swarms of Dominion fighters filled the void, their sleek black hulls reflecting the light of distant stars. Plasma beams lanced through the darkness, cutting through human orbital defenses like paper. It was the largest military operation in the history of the Galactic Federation, and it was doomed from the start. Jason Reed stood in the war room of the Terran Sovereignty headquarters, watching as the enemy fleet advanced. Around him, high-ranking military officials and AI strategists analyzed incoming data in real time. Admiral Vasquez smirked. "Right on schedule." Jason nodded. "They think they're attacking us." He turned to the holographic display. "But we've been waiting for them." The moment the Dominion ships crossed into human territory, the Revenant Protocol was activated. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The Dominion's admirals, watching their fleets carve a path through human colonies, believed victory was within reach. But then, reports started coming in. Ships lost navigation. Their targeting systems glitched. Entire battle groups went silent, their systems crashing without explanation. That's when the first human counterattack struck. In the shadow of a dying star, an unmanned Terran battleship, controlled entirely by AI, emerged from behind an asteroid belt and opened fire. Its railguns, powered by experimental magnetic acceleration, tore through Dominion hulls like they were made of paper. The enemy barely had time to react before another ship decloaked, then another, then hundreds. The humans had learned from their enemies. They had studied their tactics, their strategies. Now they were using them against them. Dominion admirals panicked as the tide turned. Human fleets, moving in unpredictable AI-coordinated patterns, outmaneuvered their forces at every turn. Dominion ships found themselves surrounded, their escape routes cut off. And then came the final blow. Cybernetic warfare. The AI viruses that humanity had developed, no longer restricted by Council laws, unleashed themselves upon Dominion networks. The enemy's own ships turned against them, firing on their allies. Dreadnoughts powered down mid-battle, their crews locked out of control systems. The war had lasted only a day. By the time the Dominion fleet realized what had happened, it was already too late. Zelthorin, watching from the bridge of his flagship, felt something he had never felt before. Fear. Humanity had rewritten the rules of war, and now, for the first time in history, the galaxy would bow to them. Zelthorin gripped the edges of his command console, his emerald eyes scanning the chaotic battlefield. The once proud Dominion fleet was in ruins. His dreadnought, the Veil of Conquest, stood as one of the last remaining warships still under his control. The rest had either been destroyed, disabled, or worse, turned against him. This is impossible," one of his bridge officers muttered, their scaled fingers shaking over the control panel. They were nothing, a lesser species. How? Zelthorin's jaw tightened. He had underestimated humanity. They all had. The Council had thought of them as reckless, as a species that needed to be guided. But the moment they had been freed from the Council's restrictions, they had evolved. Faster, deadlier, and more unpredictable than any elder species had ever anticipated. And now, the Dominion was paying the price. "Admiral," another officer cried, "we're detecting multiple FTL signatures inbound. Human reinforcements." Zelthorin turned sharply toward the holographic display. More Terran warships were emerging from hyperspace, larger, more advanced, each bristling with weaponry that shouldn't have been possible for a species this young. Humanity hadn't just been building a fleet. They had been building an empire, and now they were here to claim their victory. A transmission request came through. The comms officer hesitated before looking at Zelthorin. "It's them." Zelthorin exhaled, steeling himself before nodding. "Put them through." The hologram flickered to life, revealing Jason Reed standing tall, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Admiral Vasquez leaned against the command table, looking almost bored. "Zelthorin," Jason said, his voice calm, but edged with steel. "I'd ask if you're ready to surrender, but honestly, that ship has sailed." Zelthorin straightened, his pride warring with his survival instincts. "This war is not over," Jason smirked. "Oh, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet." He gestured to the battle behind him. "Your fleet is done. Your empire is next." Zelthorin's scales rippled in barely contained rage. "You think the Council will allow this?" Jason chuckled. "The Council? You mean the same Council that sat back and let you attack us? The same one that's terrified of what we've become?" He leaned forward. "We were the United Galactic Federation's greatest mistake. They kept us leashed, slowed us down, made sure we never got too powerful." His eyes darkened. "But then they threw us out. And now we're done playing by their rules." Zelthorin knew then. This wasn't just about the Dominion anymore. This was about humanity taking their place in the galaxy. No longer outcasts, no longer restricted. They were writing the new laws now, and the rest of the galaxy would have no choice but to follow. The war had ended. The Terran sovereignty had begun. The fall of the Zephyr Dominion was only the beginning. News of humanity's overwhelming victory spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Dominion, once an empire that had ruled through fear and brute force, was shattered. Their fleets lay in ruins, their warlords scrambling to secure what little power they had left. Some tried to flee, others attempted last-ditch resistance, but it didn't matter. Humanity had already won, and the galaxy was watching. Inside the United Galactic Federation's High Council chambers, panic gripped the elder races. The very species that had once voted to expel humanity now faced a terrifying reality. "They crushed the Dominion in a day," one counselor whispered, their many eyes wide with disbelief. "They are rewriting warfare itself," another hissed. "We have underestimated them for too long." At the head of the chamber, the Supreme Chancellor of the Council, a towering cephalopod-like being, raised a tendril. Enough, it rumbled. Humanity has overstepped. Their reckless expansion and disregard for order threaten us all. A silence fell. Everyone in the chamber understood what those words meant. They were preparing for war. But this time, the Council wouldn't just rely on one empire to fight their battle. They would unite all of them. Back on Earth, Jason Reed stood in the heart of the Terran Sovereignty headquarters, watching as holographic reports streamed in. Across former Dominion space, humanity wasn't just occupying planets. They were integrating them. Rebellious factions, long oppressed by the Dominion, welcomed human forces as liberators. Former Dominion warships, now under Terran control, were being repurposed into the growing Sovereignty fleet. Humanity wasn't just expanding. They were building something new. Admiral Vasquez walked up beside him, arms crossed. "Council's pissed," she said, tossing a datapad onto the table. "They just declared us an unlawful rogue state." Jason smirked. "Let me guess. They're calling for collective action against the human threat?" Vasquez nodded. "They're gathering a coalition. The Council is scared, Jason. They know they can't control us anymore, so they're about to throw everything they have at us." Jason exhaled, glancing at the map of the galaxy. The Council had every advantage: numbers, resources, alliances forged over millennia. On paper, humanity was still outmatched. But they weren't fighting on paper. He turned to the gathered military leaders. "They think we're reckless, unstable, that we're going to lash out first." General Carter scoffed. "They clearly don't know us." Jason nodded. "Exactly. We're not going to start this war. They are. And when they do?" He leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. "We finish it." As the Galactic Federation mobilized its grand alliance, they didn't realize the truth. They weren't fighting an upstart species anymore. They were fighting the architects of a new galactic order. And humanity? Humanity had been waiting for this moment all along. The war began not with a declaration, but with an execution. A human diplomat, sent to negotiate a peaceful resolution with the Galactic Council, was arrested upon arrival. Within hours, a public broadcast aired across the galaxy, an image of the diplomat kneeling before the Council's high tribunal, their hands bound, their face bloodied. Then, the sentence was carried out. A plasma blade swung down, and humanity had its answer. The response was immediate. On Luna, inside the war room of Terran Sovereignty headquarters, Jason Reed watched the execution replay in silence. Around him, the highest-ranking officials of humanity stood, their expressions grim. Admiral Vasquez exhaled slowly. "Well, I guess we're past negotiations." Jason's jaw tightened. He had expected war. He had even welcomed the challenge. But this? This wasn't just a strategic move. This was a message. The Council hadn't simply declared war. They had made it personal. He turned to General Carter. "How long until the fleet is ready?" Carter didn't hesitate. "We can deploy within 48 hours. Jason nodded. "Then let's make something clear." His voice was cold. Final. The Council wanted to show the galaxy what happens to those who defy them. He gestured to the holographic display, where the execution still played on loop. "Now we show them what happens when you provoke humanity." The first strike came at the edges of Council space. Terran warships, sleek and bristling with weapons the Council had deemed too dangerous centuries ago, emerged from slip space without warning. The enemy's fleets, built for control, not survival, were caught unprepared. Their defensive lines collapsed in minutes. Their colonies, used to Federation peacekeeping, surrendered before the first shots were even fired. But humanity wasn't here to occupy. They were here to burn the old order to the ground. Council shipyards were reduced to floating wreckage. Military outposts were turned into lifeless husks. Every strategic stronghold, every carefully placed defensive barrier shattered. And the most terrifying part? The Council had no idea where humanity would strike next, because humanity wasn't following any pattern the elder species understood. They weren't following rules. On the Council's homeworld, panic reigned. The Supreme Chancellor stood in the Grand War Chamber, surrounded by trembling advisors. "They are unpredictable," one of the generals admitted. "They do not fight like the Dominion. They do not fight like anyone we have faced before." The Chancellor's tendrils coiled in frustration. Then what do they want? Silence. No one had an answer. Because for the first time in history, the Council was fighting an enemy that wasn't seeking land, resources, or status. Humanity didn't want concessions. They wanted justice, and they wouldn't stop until the Council was nothing but dust. Back on Earth, Jason Reed watched as the first phase of the war unfolded exactly as planned. His fleet commanders sent in their latest reports. One by one, the Council's defenses were collapsing. But Jason knew this was just the beginning. He turned to Vasquez. "Tell me when we have a clear path." Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "A clear path to where?" Jason's expression was ice. To their homeworld. Because this wasn't just war, this was retribution. The war reached its final stage faster than anyone had predicted. The Council, once the unshakable authority of the galaxy, was now a fractured remnant of its former self. Entire fleets had been annihilated, their supply lines cut, their worlds abandoned. The carefully constructed illusion of their invincibility had been shattered by a species they had once dismissed as reckless and insignificant. And now, humanity stood at their doorstep. The skies above the Council homeworld burned. Terran warships descended like falling gods, their weapons raining destruction upon the last of the Council's defenses. Plasma turrets fired desperately from planetary fortresses, but they were no match for the AI-assisted precision of human war machines. Elite Council strike teams attempted one final stand at the capital's gates, only to be met by cybernetically enhanced human soldiers, faster and deadlier than anything they had faced before. Inside the grand chambers of the Council, Supreme Chancellor Valzorith watched as the doors to the war room were blasted open. Jason Reed stepped inside, his uniform battle-worn, his eyes cold and unyielding. Behind him, Admiral Vasquez and a team of Terran operatives spread through the chamber, weapons ready. The Chancellor, battered and desperate, raised a trembling tendril. "Please," he rasped, "there must be another way." Jason didn't blink. There was. He stepped forward. "You killed it." The execution of humanity's diplomat had sealed their fate. The war could have been avoided, a balance could have been struck, but the Council had made a choice, and now humanity was making theirs. Jason's voice was like a final verdict. "The United Galactic Federation is over." Vasquez lifted her rifle. "So is your rule." A single shot echoed through the chamber, and with that, the old order fell. The aftermath reshaped the galaxy. With the Council dismantled, humanity didn't take its place. They erased it. No more centralized power, no more bureaucratic oppression disguised as diplomacy. The old empires that had once relied on the Council's authority now had two choices: adapt to the new system of independence, or fade into irrelevance. Former Dominion colonies, long subjugated, were finally free. Merchant guilds and smaller factions, once at the mercy of Council regulations, now thrived under a new, unrestricted economy. The balance of power had shifted permanently, and at the heart of it all, humanity stood as the architects of this new era. They hadn't conquered, they had liberated. But every species in the galaxy knew one undeniable truth: humanity had been held back for too long. Now, they owned the future.